Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. I'm really excited today. So I've got a an old friend on here with me, and some of you guys may know her, some of you guys may not know her, and that's kind of the whole point of bringing her on here is to introduce her to you guys and pick her brain because uh, I may be biased, but she went to a pretty damn good university for her master's program. It's the same one that I went to. Those of you guys that don't know. But I've got Sarah Bishop on, and I actually had to practice a few times saying Sarah Bishop because I'm still stuck with saying Sarah Ford because I knew you before you got married, right? But Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, go Bulls. And I just got a new phone and I finally changed my Apple name from Sarah Ford to Sarah Bishop. So it's like one of those things that I still hadn't changed.
Yeah, that's got to be really strange. I mean, as a guy, obviously, like I don't have to worry about that when I got married,
Yeah.
but I mean, just seeing, I think I don't think I really appreciated all that went into it until after Amber and I got married, and I saw like she had to change her driver's license, she had to change her passport, she had to change, I mean, not your birth certificate, but like there's a bunch of other documents and stuff that you
Yeah,
have to
your
go
social
through, and
security. It's
oh,
like,
it's
yeah. And
nuts.
then you're mailing this stuff and it's like, is the right person getting this? Like, yeah,
Yeah, there's a whole lot that they make you guys jump through and hoops and
for
lovely
sure.
government, right? Oh, but we still sometimes will get mail with her last name on it for
Mhm.
some unknown reason. I mean, we've been married; it'll be 5 years next month,
Yeah.
and it's now it's weird. Even she looks at it, and it's kind of weird for her to see her last name on it
Yeah,
because she's been
totally.
Mathas for so long. So I don't envy what you guys have to go through when you guys choose to put up with us men and get married. So
Sometimes worth it, but yeah.
sometimes I'll make sure Mike knows that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so those of you guys that don't know much about Sarah, Sarah and I met back in 2017, which is crazy to think about at this point. Like
Oh,
we're
wow.
going on like 7 years of friendship here. And I actually met Sarah for the first time. I was doing a lab. So I was a lab assistant even before like I got into my master's program for a whole year. And actually, Sarah was helping. Wait, were you helping or were you a subject?
I was helping. So I was in undergrad. It was my
That's
last
right.
semester of undergrad,
Yep, I
and you
remember
were
that
helping
now.
out in the lab. And I think I had gotten into grad school or I was applying,
You
but
were,
like
if I
got in.
remember right, because didn't Lauren kind of convince you to
Yeah.
go this route? And we're going to get into that here in a minute. But I think you had just applied and you were waiting. I think you were waiting to hear because I was in the same boat too. Because I
Mhm.
had just missed the deadline for um, applying for that year's year one
Cohort.
class. And that's when
Right.
Campbell let me just volunteer in the lab for a whole year. So I had my application in, and that was the time period where we were waiting to hear if we got accepted or not for the following fall.
Yeah, that sounds right. God,
Yeah,
it was so long ago. I'm like, wow, like
it is.
2017.
It's kind of funny to think of how much stuff has happened in that short amount of time. And 7 years doesn't seem, on one hand, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but on the other hand, it's a whole lifetime in some
Yeah.
instances and stuff. But you have really come a long way in the last 7 years. And what I really wanted to bring you on here to talk about is your journey, because you and I, we have a very similar past that we'll touch on a little bit, and kind of how you went about overcoming that, and then the path that you're on now, because you're rocking and rolling right now. You're awesome. You've got your own coaching team that you started. Like you are in a really good position. But for those of you guys that don't know about my past, which I think is probably very few at this point, I had a very severe eating disorder, and actually Sarah did as well. We didn't go through treatment at the same time, but we actually went through the same treatment center, which is
Mhm.
we didn't know until after we had already met. I was already out, she was already out, we were healthy, we were on our way to recovery and stuff. Um, Eating disorders are very prominent with women, right? It's not as prominent with men, although we are seeing that it is a lot more these days, right? What was the catalyst for you? Like, what sent you over the edge? We hear stories all the time as far as my mom talked to me this way, or I looked at these celebrities that looked a certain way. What was it for you that kind of led you down that path?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, yesterday was actually my 9-year treatment anniversary, the second go around in
Wow.
treatment. So
Congrats. That's awesome.
yeah, so it's wild to think about. But yeah, I mean, that was 9 years ago, but my eating disorder started before then when I would say like 13, 14.
Yeah.
Probably 14 is when it really like that switch flipped, like you're saying.
Do you find that that's a common age for a lot of girls to start?
I think so. Like the more, because too, like as a coach, like you talk to more people, and whether or not it was diagnosed or not, like it's a lot of times it's like that late middle school or like early college, like somewhere in that time frame. Sometimes sooner, which is super sad. And I mean, it's always sad, but it's really sad to hear about an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
um, already kind of having to deal with that. But yeah, for me, I was 14, and I would say for me the catalyst, like the event, was me getting ready to go into high school and starting to run more and wanting to go out for the cross country team.
Yeah.
And with that running, it kind of like triggered like a competitive kind of switch to continue to improve as a runner. And
Yeah.
with that, like I thought, oh, if I'm lighter, it's going to be better, weight wise. And I was never like, I wasn't heavy, I was just a normal kid.
Yeah.
um but yeah, so it just, and I think when you have a little bit of a genetic kind of predisposition to addictions, and I even
For
have
sure.
eating disorders that run in my family, um just kind of off to the races once that switch kind of flipped.
It's funny you mentioned the competitiveness that comes out and stuff because that was I didn't note it at the time, like that's what was happening, but through therapy and a lot of introspective work later on down the road, that was a lot of my issue with the military too. Like I was known as the PT guy in my
Mhm.
military unit. And that coupled with anxiety and OCD and stuff led me down a whole path. But for women, especially that kind of middle school, teenage years and stuff, that's primarily not I don't want to say primarily, that's the wrong word, but that is sports related, gymnastics, swimming, cross country, those types of events I see as a huge catalyst for a lot of teenage girls and stuff because just what you said, you feel like you want to be lighter and you can perform better, which is really ironic considering how much we know now about nutrition and the role of nutrition in sports performance, right?
Right.
But like when you're in that developmental stage of your life. And we all know teenagers were not the smartest people in the whole world, right? You're
Mhm.
still learning things and stuff, and how much you can be swayed by peer pressure or social media or
Magazines.
news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have, I mean, aside from, wanting to be better for sports and all that stuff, did you feel any pressure from family or friends or anybody to kind of force you down that route?
No, not like directly, I would say. Like I not from family. I mean, I was always, athletic. I think maybe just my role like was being like that perfect kid, or that's what I saw my role as. So I think that was maybe a part of it, like family wise, but and like family role wise.
Hmm.
But as far as like friends, I think it was going into high school, going into a bigger high school, and not knowing a lot of people, like kind of like, okay, like how am I gonna fit in?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
not that I thought losing weight would necessarily make me, or I obviously wasn't off to, get an eating disorder, in this, but I
Right.
certainly, thought like, oh, if I look a certain way, that's going to help, with, my status or whatever, in high school.
Well, and you just touched on something that I think is really important is that perfectionism, that need for control, like that is overwhelmingly the characteristics behind people that usually tend to have eating disorders, right? I know for me, I'm raising my
Yeah.
hand for those of you
Especially
guys that
I
aren't
think the
watching.
anorexia, it's, super common. And I
Yeah,
was definitely that textbook case, I think, of like, perfectionist. And I mean, yeah, like big life changes. I feel like that's when people are also especially like vulnerable, is when there's something big changing in their life. And
Absolutely.
what am I going to
Absolutely.
control? Oh, food, exercise, what I do not eat, my body. And that's where I think it can kind of rear its ugly head too in recovery, is during those life stages.
What are for those people that are listening or watching, like that have never struggled with food or, disordered eating thoughts or habits, in your own experience, in your own words, can you describe like what that's like, what that feeling is like going through that on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's like once you know you have an eating disorder, you can kind of start separating like the voice of the eating disorder from your own voice.
Yeah.
But like when you're in it and maybe early in it, it's very much like just this voice in your head that is literally telling you like, no, you can't eat that, or you have to restrict, or you have to get up and go run those 3 miles, or you have to do more, and you're not good enough if you don't do it. And like just very intrusive, I guess, thoughts.
Absolutely.
And so
That's a
even when
really good
I
way to put it, for
started,
sure.
like I knew I had a problem and was like maybe trying to recover, it was like I literally could not. It was,
Yeah.
I remember like, trying to explain to my dad, just like I'm like, I literally can't do it. Like I can't. Like
You're
I
an
can't stop.
addict. You're an
And
addict
that's
at
when
that point.
I had a yeah.
In my book, I kind of described it as like, once I kind of got through the denial stage and I knew what I was doing, even though, like you, I couldn't stop. I described it
Mhm.
as though like I was like hovering outside of my body, looking down on myself, knowing like, hey, don't do that. Don't go to the gym for the third time during the day. Don't restrict. Don't do any of that. But I couldn't control it. I couldn't stop myself from doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that is maybe a misconception out there, is that um, people, like I said, that have never experienced this, don't know anything that we're talking about. I think the perception is like, hey, they don't really know what they're doing. And that's not really the case. I think most of the time people actually do know what they're doing, but it's like that addictive drug that you can't control your actions on your own. And that's
Mhm.
where a lot of times intervention has to come in, and maybe hospitalization and therapy and all this stuff, because you want to stop, but you can't. And you
Right.
don't know how to get your body or your mind to shift course, because a lot of and it's not just a food and exercise thing. Those are just byproducts of whatever else you're dealing with, right? I mean, for me, I had a lot of um, fear. I had a lot of lack of control issues. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of emotions, and I
Mhm.
was using what I knew best and what I loved, which was nutrition. I've always loved nutrition. I'm sure you have too. Um, Exercise, sports, athletics, the training. I used that as my coping mechanism to try to handle all that other stuff, and it wasn't enough. It got out of control, and it sounds like that's kind of what you did too.
Yeah. It was like, okay, if I can be good at this, like I'm
Hmm.
going to be good at this. And it's fucked up, but I was good at it. So
Did you ever? And I can't remember what you said. I think I don't think I heard you earlier. Did you know right from the start what was going on, or did you have like a sense of denial for a little bit?
I had a sense of denial for not for long, but maybe for the first like 6 to 9 months of kind of acting out.
Yeah.
And when my mom first like kind of called me on it and made me go see a doctor, I remember going to that doctor's appointment though. Like it was a gastroenterologist is who they referred me to.
Yep.
I remember going to that appointment and like literally just asking like God, like, please let there be something wrong with me. Like physically.
Yes.
Please let there
Yes.
be something physically wrong with me. And
Yeah.
there was nothing physically wrong with me besides, the consequences of what I was doing.
Right. Yeah. Mine was discovered, like when I was in the army, and um, I had lost a bunch of weight, and you know, especially when I went through it, and being a male in the military, nobody thought eating disorder, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so they sent me for tests, and all this stuff. And I want to say it was some crazy number, like over $300,000 worth of testing that they did on my digestive system. They checked for, because I had just gotten back from Iraq too. So they thought maybe I picked up a parasite or something.
Right.
But nobody knew all these secretive things I was doing, right?
Hmm.
Like getting up at 4 a.m. before morning PT and doing like 300 burpees in my room before I even went to, like, that sort of
Right.
stuff, right? And I was the same way. I was like, okay, because I didn't want to stop doing what I did want to stop, but I didn't know how to stop, right? And I was doing the same thing. I was like, please, like, find something that maybe they can get off my back and not think this other thing, right? I mean, they thought I had cancer. They thought everything under the sun, and they tested for it. And it was the same thing, and it came back no. And then that's when the doctors, because I was in the ICU for a
Hmm.
couple weeks,
Yeah.
and my parents flew up and stuff, and the doctors and them were talking, and they're like, I think that's when they kind of put two and two together what was going on, and then they all had to come in and kind of confront me with it, and that
Yeah.
didn't go well at all.
Oh,
I
I'm sure.
I
Yeah.
I fought
Well,
that like
because
crazy.
then it's, I mean, especially for us, like, oh, you're saying I'm not perfect. It's my mental health.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
how dare you?
And that, I didn't realize how destructive that perfectionist mindset can be until you're in a situation like that, right? Because at that point, then I was like, okay, well, they know what's going on. I know what's going on, but I don't want to stop. Like, I
Yeah.
just, I want to, but at the same time, it's like I'm afraid of what I might feel like if I stop,
Yeah.
right? Because like this is all I know now. I mean, this is years and years of this happening. Like, this is my new norm. So if they take this away from me, A, how am I going to deal with my OCD? How am I going to deal with my anxiety? How am I going to deal with all this other stuff I was going through? And who am I going to be outside of this?
Hmm.
Like, that became my identity, which I think is another reason why having an identity is a very dangerous thing for people. Like,
Yeah.
to be known as, hey, I am this, right? Or I am this, because what happens when that goes away? And I
Yeah.
think that that's a big fear of people not wanting to come forward with eating disorders or any sort of mental health issues that they're dealing with, is like, I don't know how to feel other than this, right? Is it going to
Hmm.
be worse if they take this away from me and I get better? You don't know. Um, I don't think there's probably a whole lot of teenage kids that are listening to this podcast, but I think that there's a lot of parents that probably are. What advice would you give to a mom? And I'll use a mom and daughter example since I'm asking you, and that's kind of, your area. What sort of advice would you tell that mom if she thinks that her daughter is undergoing this, or son? I don't want to limit it to just daughters, but
Yeah.
how would you tell her to approach the topic as to not scare their child and make them go deeper into it, but to also show that they care?
Yeah. I think, like, now that I'm older, like, I have a little maybe different of an answer than I would have had when I was younger, of
For
course.
sure.
But
With
I mean,
age
my
comes wisdom.
advice would be absolutely do not let it go.
Yeah,
Like, absolutely do not enable in any way. That doesn't mean food police. That doesn't mean come out and be like, you have a problem, but ask, your daughter, like, what's going on? What's going on at school? What's going on, with your friends? Like, how are you doing? You know, um, I mean, I really think everybody would benefit from having therapy or a counselor at
I agree.
some point in their life.
Yeah,
So, presenting it that way, I think, is big, of like, hey, like, let's, talk to somebody, maybe together or, by yourself, whatever, but like, don't let it go, because the longer that eating disorder has to just build momentum. I mean, I'm not saying like catching it earlier helps necessarily, because I don't think that's the case, but I think being relentless and being there, loving your kid through it, is, the way to be.
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
think
because
it's
I'm
also
glad my mom
important.
was like that. In hindsight.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember, like, if you are approaching your child or whoever it is, um, they're not going to be happy with you. So
Right.
just understand that,
Oh,
right?
thanks. Yeah, thanks, mom.
It's
No, yeah.
it's they're going to, especially if it's a parent-child dynamic, right? They're going to say, "I hate you," or "No, you're wrong," or they're going to deny it. They're going to get mad at you for bringing it up. But that's not your child talking, that's the disease talking, and
Yeah.
you have to understand that, and I know a lot of people are it's not a comfortable situation or topic to bring up. I mean, you're talking about a mental health issue, right?
Mhm.
And people don't know how to approach those topics. And I think one of the things is that they're like, "Oh, my child's going to be mad at me, or they're going to not want to talk." Like, no, your job as a parent is to keep that child alive, right? And I
Yeah.
promise you, like, I was not happy, and I was not a child when this happened. Like, I was in my mid 20s when this happened, and your kid will, once they get the help and they get healthy, they will understand and they will actually appreciate it so much more. So just like Sarah said, don't let it go. Don't let it go. You see something, and it might not be an eating disorder. It might be another mental health issue, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, like, anything that it could be. Like, don't wait. You have to jump on that right away, and just
Yeah.
expect they're gonna deny it. They're gonna hate you. They're gonna be mad at you. They're gonna do all this stuff. But that's the disease. That's not your child or whoever you're approaching.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And two, like there's resources for you out there if you're a parent.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I know for one off the top of my head is if you go to the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness.com,
Yeah.
there's online support groups or in-person support groups for family and friends of people with eating disorders.
Yeah.
So,
The
like,
resources available now are so much more than they
oh,
even
way
were
different.
5, 10 years ago. 100%. Um, I don't wanna stay on that topic for too long, but I thought it was really important because I think it sets up where I want this conversation to go next, and that is, how do you not only survive the eating disorder, but how do you thrive afterwards? And I think that you are a prime example of how you don't just survive, you thrive, right? Because you took a very bad experience and you kind of made it, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth and tell me if I'm wrong. You kind of made it your wife's mission
Yeah.
to make sure that this doesn't happen, or that people at least have the education and the right coaching and the right resources to not fall into poor health habits. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think, yeah, when you put it that way, for sure. I mean, whether it's like as a coach or just like, the information I put out on Instagram or podcasts, stuff like that, just because I know for me, like education was so pivotal in my own recovery. Like, you
Absolutely.
were saying at the beginning, like we didn't know about nutrition or we thought smaller was better. But for me, like really learning about like, no, like this is how you fuel your body. And if you want to be the athlete you say you want to be, if you want to perform, hell, if you even want to look the way you say you want to, this
Right.
is what it requires. And it's not starving yourself, it's not running yourself into the ground, and really just educating people on like health as a whole.
Hmm.
And I think for me, like I definitely knew as I was going through recovery in those early stages and kind of not fully bought in that what I was doing had serious health consequences, but I don't think I really grasped it or grasped like the magnitude of how the body works. So, like everything influences everything. So like,
Right.
yeah, like as a female, maybe you don't care, if you don't have a period, or you're like, oh, my bone health, it's fine, because you're young and you don't think about it. But it all like it can come back to get you, later on when you're older. So just
Absolutely.
steering
You
people
feel
away from
you're invincible when you're that age, right? Like,
that. Right.
and
Yeah.
and and you're not supposed to know everything at that age and stuff. I mean, that's what years and wisdom do, is they teach you more and you learn more. And that's why you see so many people once they start hitting 40, they're like, I need to really start concentrating on my health now, because they were kind of in that mindset of like, well, yeah, I can just get away with this, right? And then Father Time eventually starts catching up to you. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm going to be 40 this year, and I'm telling you what, like, even just the last couple of years, my body is not recovering the same as it used to recover. And
Yeah.
and I,
It's
I
like,
think that some of it is from a lot of the trauma and stuff that I put my body through in my early to mid 20s and stuff like that. And things you do when you're younger have an effect on you later on. It doesn't mean it's the end all be all. It doesn't mean you can't still have a good thriving life, but you learned, and I think because you experienced this at an early age, like you've got a leg up on a lot of people because you're still really young. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, like in a positive way. You're still very young and you have a long, long life ahead of you. And you now are armed with this knowledge. Not only that, you're armed with the knowledge, you're armed with the experience, and you're armed with the empathy to be able to help people in that situation. Not that you strictly work with eating disorder patients, but I know like you and me, like we've worked with people like that we've had to refer out to people because it's like,
Yeah.
all right, you might not realize what's going on right now, but I do. And I know where this is leading towards. And so to have that sort of experience in your mid 20s is invaluable, right? Like that is going to that's going to change a lot of lives. And I think that you should know how powerful that is, and that your story is going to help a lot of people for many, many years to come. And the hard work that you put in after going through that is vital. And that's where I want to shift this towards, because not only, we talked about going back and get your master's and things like that, like that's the obvious, but in terms of actually applying that knowledge to changing your health and your physique, that growth over the last 7 years from that tiny little girl that I saw that walked into the lab that day to a great muscular, still very feminine physique that you have now, that doesn't happen overnight. And that doesn't happen without a mind shift change. So what are some of the things that you've changed in your training since your journey started to now?
Yeah, I would say like when we met, like 2017, that was like kind of like 2017, 2018. Like that's when I like started really shifting like my training, and like I was very early recovery then. I was very early and still like, recovery, it's not just like, oh, I'm like I always say in recovery because I feel like it's always, evolving.
For sure. For
Um,
sure.
but I was still very much like cardio, like not necessarily eating, the amount of carbs I needed to for the training that I was doing, all the things there. But I think just for me, like, again, like that pursuit of like wanting to be a better athlete and, getting into weight training. And like, for me, it was just fun to like feel strong. And it was fun to I still just remember like the first day I got like in the big girl squat rack, at USF, like,
Yep.
I went over to the cages. Um, and just like, hey, like, yeah, I wasn't, that strong, but I was, whatever, decent for my size. And I knew like how to improve. And to me, that was like, I just really enjoyed that process. So yeah, like as I continued to learn more, it was very much just like learning through trial and error that,
Yeah.
hey, like you can't train 6 days a week and do abs on Sunday and expect to progress like you want to, because you're just not giving your body that time to recover. And same with the food too, like, pushing myself to be uncomfortable and, gain, more weight than I had, thought of. I had already gained so much weight. In 2019, I did compete for the first time in bodybuilding, so in NPC bikini division, and I was so tiny, but I think for me that was also just a huge test of like, can I do this? Can I diet? And then can I
Right.
come out of this diet and not be triggered like by my past? And here I am 5 years later and gained 30 something pounds from my stage weight.
Yeah.
So very much showed myself like, hey, I can. And I think like what you're saying earlier about like what's going to happen after, that was a huge fear like for me, just to choose recovery as a whole. And it was like a lingering fear, but as I just continued throughout my health fitness journey, is like, what's the after going to be like? Like, am I going to look how I want on stage? How am I going to look when I reverse? How am I going to look when
Right.
I bulk? What are other people going to say? Like, it was always like that lingering fear, but I kept challenging it with just this mindset of like, let's see what happens. And just through that, like, let's see what happens. Like, I liked what happened, and I just kept building, from there.
And that's really important, is that, like, you said it, you made the choice, right? You said,
Yeah.
like, I choose health over killing myself, basically. And each little benchmark along the way provided you more confidence that you could go on
Mhm.
to the next one, right? Like, you didn't just jump from on stage to 30 pounds heavier in a year. Like, this has been a 5-year journey,
Yeah.
right? And I want to go back to something that you mentioned as far as getting in the big girl squat rack at USF and all that stuff. You were not a very, uh, I think it's fair to say, very confident person in terms of weight training when you started. Like, it was new to you. Like,
Yeah.
like you said, you were an athlete, but like, you were a cardio person mostly. So there's a lot of people that are in that same boat, that they're like, I don't want to go to the gym. I'm going to look like a fool. I don't know what to do. And this is what I tell people. I'm like, listen, it, this may be harsh. I don't know, but I think it's the truth. Nobody cares about you in the gym.
That
Like,
was what I was thinking.
it's like, okay,
Everybody's there for themselves, really.
let's say, hypothetically, somebody is watching you and you're doing something wrong and they're judging you, right? They're doing that for about 30 seconds, and then they're not thinking about you the rest of the time. As soon as
Mhm.
they walk out of those doors, you're not on their mind the rest of the day. Hey, did you see that person who has no idea what they're doing in the squat rack or on the leg press or anything like that? So we have to get over ourselves, right? And part of doing that is understanding that you're not as important as you think you are. And that's a very powerful statement to believe. And it doesn't mean that you don't have rights and you're not valuable and all that stuff, but it's like, your journey is your journey. Somebody
Mhm.
else's journey is their journey. Like, how much time do you spend thinking about somebody else's journey? The answer is you don't, right? So why do you think somebody else is going to judge you and think about you in the gym when they leave for the night? They're not. So getting over that fear of starting is, it's literally the first step into making the change. But I know a lot of people are still stuck there, and they just can't get over that hump. So
Yeah.
what helped you get over that hump?
I would say a couple things. Like, as far as like building with confidence, like outside of the gym, even it was like looking up YouTube videos, like
Mm,
learning, like, okay, like I kind of get what I'm supposed to do with this machine, by watching this video, beforehand. For me with the squat rack, I flat out asked somebody for help. Like I said,
yes.
"Hey, I want to squat in the squat rack today. Can you help me?" And I mean, granted, they're college boys. Of course, they want to help me, but they're like, hell yeah, like, we want to help you. Like,
Right.
I think if you go to a gym, especially like no knocking you fit or anything like that, but if you go to a gym where people like lift and like, especially if there's like bodybuilders around, like they were you, like, you know,
That's really important to bring up, because those are the types of gyms that people are most afraid to go to,
right, but
right?
they're the least judgmental for sure.
Exactly, exactly, because most people, and this is, I don't know if this is just a byproduct of where we're at in society right now, but people want to automatically assume the worst of
Mhm.
another person, right? Instead of like, oh, this person might really love helping, right? And maybe they have some knowledge, or you know what, maybe they just want to make themselves feel good and try to help somebody. Who cares what it
Yeah,
is? You weren't afraid to ask for help, and I think that's the key to you getting over that hurdle. And I think that's the key to a lot of people that they need to listen to, is like, listen, just ask for help. Nobody's going to make fun of you. You're going to advance faster that way too, instead of
yeah,
just trying to go in and figure it out on your own, right? Like, what
yeah,
other area do we just do that in life? We don't. Like, we ask for help. We go to school, we learn more. Like, we don't just approach this life by ourselves. But you also mentioned resources, going to YouTube, talking with people. Who are some of the people early on in your lifting journey that you feel presented information in a way that you could grasp, that helped you propel to where you're at now?
yeah. Wow, like bringing me back to the old
I
YouTube days.
know.
I used to watch. I would say Jeff Nippard was
Yep.
one of the YouTubers that I would go to, and because he was one of the first like YouTubers, I think, with like lifting
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
so I
so.
would watch a lot of those videos, honestly. Like I'm trying to think of who else like I would watch. God, maybe GPS Fitness or Elite FTS. I forget. There was a YouTube series called like the Squat Pillars or something. And I used to watch those.
Yeah, I think I kind of remember what I think I can
Yeah, but
remember.
I would say Jeff Nippard was a big one. That's the first one that kind of comes to mind. Lane was putting out stuff too, but more on the nutrition end.
Yeah, he was really big on that at the beginning.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I would watch his videos like for with that. Not a lot of females though. Like I'm trying to think like female YouTubers, and I just
Yeah,
I
back
don't know.
then, I mean, you're talking what, 16, 17, 18, that
Yeah.
time
Oh,
frame.
maybe you probably don't know who they are, but Amanda Bucci
Yep.
and Emily Hayden. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
they were YouTubers like around that time, and they both had, I don't know if they had demos, but like, I saw what they were doing, as far as like the compound lifts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's when Emily was like really affiliated with Alpha Elite too, right?
Yeah, and first form and all that,
Yeah,
right? I don't know if she still is or not.
I don't either. I haven't kept up with that like I used to in the
Yeah.
past, but I actually met her at NPC Nationals in 2017. Uh,
Okay.
Not in Miami. Yeah, that was the only time I've ever met her. But yeah, she was big back then. There, I know there's a bunch more, but I think that actually shows because now, I mean, we could rattle off female
People, or yeah, you just
content
go to YouTube
creators
and
right now,
there's lists of, yeah.
and that just shows in the short time frame in the grand scheme of things that you started your journey till now, how much females have grown in this industry. And I don't think it's that they weren't there. I think it's that the confidence to put content out and to relate to people like yourself who can then spread the message to other females and grow females in lifting sports. Like that is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. I did a few years ago. I did an interview with Kristen Dunsmore,
Okay.
and like just talking to her about the growth of women in like strength competitions and all that was just eye opening as far as how far it's come in a very short time. And I think that's great. And I think that having people like that, having people like yourself who has a podcast that they put out pretty weekly, right? You do it weekly? Is it
Yeah,
weekly?
with yeah, my friends, Sonia and Meredith. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was weekly. I figured, I'm pretty sure I thought it was weekly. You guys putting out information like that and getting into coaching and being more visible is how we stop future generations from eating disorders or other unhealthy practices that males and females used to undergo, right? And being more visible, being that new mentor for the younger generation, I think that's got to be a good feeling, right? I mean,
Yeah,
especially knowing where
totally.
you came from and you have a lot of power at your fingertips to be able to empower a lot of women out there. And I know you don't take that for granted and you're always looking to grow. You're always looking to educate yourself and learn more to help. And, I saw you dig into learning blood work and learning about, how to get your menstrual cycle back and all the issues that you went through with that. From all the things that you've learned since your start, what has been the most powerful for you in terms of maybe your own personal health growth and like what you work with your clients on?
Can you ask it one more time? You kind of glitched out.
Oh, sorry about that. So, with all the things that you've learned over the last 5 to 7 years, actually, I'm going to rephrase this question. All right. I phrased it one way. I'm going to rephrase it another way. What has been the most valuable thing for your health that you've learned? And then what has been the most valuable thing as a coach that you've learned to help with your clients?
Ooh, that's good. Honestly, like for myself, a lot of things just building on my recovery was, just it being shown for me time and time again from the universe that you have to rest, you have to slow down, like you have to ask for help
Yeah.
was, just a continued theme because I think especially the more you know, the more, the what ifs just kind of go through your mind of like what I could be doing, or what, supplement I could try, or what doctor should I see, or is this working? Is this not working? Do I have this issue? And, just like, and just slowing down in general, like, just like you were saying, I think earlier, like, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. Cause I think that's what's really gets people is, at the end of the day, like any type of imbalance, whether it's, your hormone health or digestion or whatever it is, like there's some type of stressor, or multiple
Yeah.
stressors at the core of that. And that stressor could be your overtraining, it could be your poor quality diet, it could be like just this constant negative body image that you walk around with, or caring what other people think. And those things just compound. So for
Yeah.
me, just like really like, what are like big and little fucks here? Like what like do I
Absolutely.
not need to stress about? Um was honestly really big, and part of, all that healing. So yeah, like you can take the supplements, you can, do the diet and, see all the doctors, whatever. But like if you don't fix like that, like if you don't like get honest with yourself about, hey, like what are my like big things here that are really going to move the needle, it just, you're just not going to get to where you want to be, how you think it's going to go. It's just not going to go the way you want.
Right. So you touched on, you mentioned supplements. What are your thoughts on supplements for, and I'm sure you probably get this question too, like when someone signs up for coaching, like what supplement should I be on? Right?
Yeah.
What do I need to be on? The answer I always give is like, listen, I'm not going to push supplements on you. I'm not going to say like you have to spend $100 a month on supplements. Honestly, I think more people take them just out of thinking they need to take them, other than rather than actually being educated about if they need them, right? So I'll tell people, like, same thing with vitamins and multivitamins and all this stuff. Like, go get blood work, see if you're actually deficient in something. Don't
Hmm.
just take vitamin D because you heard someone else is taking vitamin D. Like, are you actually deficient in vitamin D, vitamin
Yeah.
C, so on and so forth? You're not going to know unless you go get blood work. And with supplements, I think that it's obviously marketing comes in play with supplement companies, right? But so many people are like, I need to take beta alanine, I need to take creatine, and I need to take both this and this and this and this. How do you broach that subject with about supplementation with your clients when they bring it up?
I'm the same way as you. Like, let's not just go, sweep the kitchen sink, and think you need to take. Because I think a lot of people, like, they're like, oh, I have a headache. What should I take? My digestion's bad. What should I take? And then you're just, it's the same as Western medicine then. You're
Yeah.
just,
We've
instead
been
of a
trained to
medication,
think
yeah,
that.
it's a supplement for every, feeling or whatever, every, symptom. So yeah, so I'm with you. Like, let's get blood work. Let's see what you really need. But then at the same time, even if I have, let's take, gut health, for example, like
Yep.
say I know what's wrong with your gut. If your diet is crappy, like if you're running on caffeine all day, if you can't put together, a couple weeks of just consistent meals and meal prepping, like I'm not going to go tell you to take, a supplement for your gut health, because you're wasting your money, essentially. Like we're not going to like jump into a fancy protocol when this
You
is
can't
just a
even follow the
mess.
basics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've had some smart ass comments about supplementation before, and luckily most people find it funny when I say it and they don't take any offense by it. But I'm like, okay, well, these are the supplements that I recommend for you. I recommend that you supplement staying up at night watching Netflix with sleep. I
Yes.
recommend that you supplement alcohol with more water. And I just do this back and forth. And they're like, okay, I get it. I get
Yeah,
it.
and
I was
trust
like,
me, like, I take supplements, like, like, there's a time
yeah,
and a place, right?
there is
But
a time. Absolutely. There's a time and
yeah,
a
but
place.
like you said, like, vitamin D, like, I see a lot of people that, like, their vitamin D levels are too high, or,
Yes, you can
it's
actually
like,
have a toxification from vitamins
yeah,
if
and
you.
everything has an effect. It's not just like the body physiology. I think, like, when I was a lot younger, I just thought it was like checkers, right? Like, you make a move and then,
Right.
like, this thing happens.
That's
But
a good
it's
way to
like,
put it.
yeah, it's like Chinese checkers, and there's like some rules don't apply sometimes. And it's like, it's,
Well,
we're,
let's get into that. Let's get
yeah.
into that because that's a great. I wasn't even planning on going here with that, but research, right? Evidence-based research, it doesn't apply to everybody. And like understanding under what conditions that research was presented, right? How did it, was there a control group? Was it a double-blind study? How many participants? Like how long was it? People will see research that comes out and actually, oh man, who was it today that had a really good post about this? Oh, it'll pop up in my mind. But they compared like the body of knowledge was like this huge circle, right? And then new evidence was this like little dot that just adds on to the body of evidence
Mhm.
that we already have. So people will see this new research, whatever it may be, and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to do that. Well, okay, let's look at the conditions that it was under. Is that realistic to your lifestyle, right? Are you going to be able to do this for 24 weeks straight? Are you going to be in a lab under controlled conditions for 24 weeks straight? Like all this stuff. And I think it's really important to present to people that like, yes, we are evidence-based coaches. We believe in science. We utilize it with our coaching, but there has to be that element of individuality coupled
Mhm.
with it, right? And so your general philosophy of coaching, like when you start with a client, how are you utilizing evidence-based with the individual to get started? Like for me, I'll just tell you real quick, like I always start people pretty much as conservative as possible at the beginning because I want to actually see what little we can get away with to get the most results so that we have more tools in our toolbox. And I know you're kind of the same way, but can you go a little bit more in depth with like how you start with a client, what sort of information you gather from them in order to get them going?
Yeah. So Meredith is my business partner, and we started Fortify Health, and we have a very in-depth intake questionnaire, I
Hmm.
would say, because we want to know, I want to know your history, right? Like I want to kind of understand like your own N of one, like you were saying. And
Yep.
then, I'm gonna take what I know, about nutrition, about training, what I've seen work for other people, my opinion as a coach, like, kind of what you're ready for, what you're not ready for. And like I'm going to start basic. And we're going to start with just like a lot of times, like people get mad because it's like, I want you to kind of keep doing what you're doing, like for this
Yep.
first week. But I mean, we know it's the power of like having somebody watch over you. Like sometimes you change your behavior a little bit and maybe like, you
Exactly.
thought you were eating 2000 calories. Um, and now, I have you start actually tracking 2000 calories and you're like, oh wow, I'm really hungry. Or like, I'm so full, like I wasn't eating this much. Or, you start
Right.
eating more whole foods and all of a sudden like, it's a lot more to handle than you were used to eating 2000 calories of, Dunkin' Donuts and Chipotle, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever the case might be. So yeah, like you said, like there's so many tools that we have as a coach. So it's like knowing like when to apply, the tool, and having those in kind of like your back pocket to use, as needed, versus like here's all the things and I want you to do them, all at once. And it's like, no, like let's start at the bottom and build from there.
Yeah.
Because then it won't be so, overwhelming too.
Yeah, so we want sustainability as well as progress and stuff. I actually, so you mentioned something about, them not eating exactly what they thought they were eating, right? I got that perfect scenario right now with the guy who's reverse dieting with me who said he was taking in around 1900 calories. And so I kind of started him at 1900 calories that first week. Um, and he lost a couple pounds. And he's like, I am really hungry. I'm like, okay, cool. We got some good data. Bumped you up, bumped him up, I think, to like 2000 calories, another 100, something like that. Lost more weight, bumped him up again. Just checked in today, lost more weight. So we're 3 weeks in. He's over 5 pounds down, and we're already up to like 2200 calories from where he started. And that's a huge jump in
Mhm.
a 3 week span. Um, but I told him in the check in this morning, I was like, all right, man, I don't think you were eating 18 or 1900 calories because yes, we do see some weight loss occasionally through a reverse dieting process, but not like this,
I
right?
was
If
gonna
you're
say you could
actually,
have flipped that though. Like, so this is marketing. Anybody listening, you could have said, "My client lost six
yeah,
pounds in 3 weeks and ate 300 calories more." And it's like,
yep. But
no, like
that's
yes, that happens, but probably
it's
something else
it's
causing that to
actually
happen.
it's an outlier for sure. But those cases where they are actually eating what they report, right? And then you move them up and they lose weight. Those are the outliers. More so than not, people that are losing a lot of weight at the beginning of a reverse diet are in this guy's scenario where they weren't actually eating the number of calories that they reported they were eating. They were actually eating more. So therefore, when you start them lower and you work themselves up, they're still in a deficit from where they actually
Mhm.
were hitting. But like you said, they start tracking, they start getting a little bit more adherence, they start having some accountability towards having to check into somebody, and behaviors change. Habits don't change unless your behaviors change, unless your mindset changes. And a lot of times people will want to just make these big jumps either down or up right away. And it's like, all right, well, prove to me for a couple weeks that you're doing what you say you're doing. And worst case scenario, all right, no weight change, right? If you are truly at that maintenance that you say you're at, there's not going to be much weight change. But if what I think is going to happen happens, we're going to be in a much better position to know how to progress you whichever way you're going, right? And be more effective in the long term. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't like to advertise too much those people that lose a lot of weight on a reverse diet because it's not I don't want people going into it expecting that. Because
Right.
that's realistic expectations is a huge part of what we do. Like I tell everybody up front, like this is the weight gain that we're shooting for each month. Like as we go up, you will gain weight. Not all weight gain is body fat. Of course, this is what's going to happen. You're going to increase some water, some glycogen. Hopefully, the longer you go, we're going to build some new muscle tissue along the way, which is all going to add to your weight. But we can strip that down later on, right? So I know that you probably get people that have these expectations of losing 20 or 30 pounds in a month, right? Uh, I mean, that's just society. That's what people
Mhm.
are primed to think. When somebody has an unrealistic expectation, well, what is an unrealistic expectation, right? How do you navigate that conversation with them in order to show them that you care about their goal and their health and what they want to achieve, but what they want isn't really possible right now?
Yeah. So and I think just because of the type of messaging I put out on social media and stuff, I don't get a whole lot of people like that anymore.
Yeah,
But what I do say, like when people like ask me, is my goal realistic? Like, let's use, like I want to lose, 25 pounds.
right.
Do you think we can do that, in a cut? And I'll say, hey, like, I think this is a good, long term goal. And I think we could do this, maybe over two cuts, depending on somebody's history. Like, yeah, some people could lose 20 pounds in a single cut and it be sustainable. But I like to kind of explain to people, like, hey, like, this might be a multiple cut goal, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, like, we're not after, like, yes, for some people losing weight, having, a certain number on the scale is good for their health, but for most people they're after a look, right?
Absolutely.
So if
Yep.
we, like, yes, let's do this cut, and then, let's take some time, let's sit at maintenance, let's focus on building muscle, your body composition is going to change. So I think people just get stuck in general, like whether it's the scale going up or down, like getting hard set on a number of,
Yeah.
like, oh, 135 is going to be my magic number, as a female. And it's like, is it though? Like, what about 137? Like, or,
Yeah. Do you think
why is
it's going to be
that
that
number?
big of a difference? For
Yeah.
sure.
Like, I mean, so I think like for that is a big thing for people. And just, I mean, the training piece is where I feel like so many people could tap in and really do a lot of damage in a good way as far as their physique goes. And
Yeah.
I mean, kind of what you were saying, like with the reversing, like that's definitely one thing I've changed since like 2019 when I first started, online coaching. Is I used to think, everybody would benefit from a reverse diet and, doing this reverse diet process. Now I think everybody would benefit from sitting their ass at maintenance for a
Mhm.
solid like 9 months, 6 to 9 months,
Right.
training hard, like learning how to train properly, learning how to eat properly. And I think they would get a lot of results from that.
Well, we're just conditioned to not sit still, right? And that carries over into our physique changes. Like people are either having to build or they have to cut. They have to build or they have to cut. Like Nicole actually had a really great meme
Yeah,
today
today I
with
think.
the Mean
Yeah.
Girls one where if you guys have seen the original Mean Girls, I haven't seen the new one that came out. I mean, it takes me back to high school days. But just I remember seeing the original one come out. But the where she's at the math elite contest or whatever it is, and she goes, the possibility is endless or infinite or whatever
The
it
limit does
is.
not exist.
The
Yeah.
limit does not exist. That's what it is. And
Yeah.
Nicole put up a post of, how long should you stay at maintenance, and she used that. I thought it was clever. It was hilarious. Um, but that is something that doesn't even enter people's minds. Like, oh wait, maintenance is a wait. That's just some sort of like myth, some sort of fairy tale that I hear out there. Like that's actually something I can do. It's like, yeah, that's actually something you should do. You should spend more time at maintenance during the year than you are in a cut. Um, and that can be really daunting for a lot of people. And I don't, I don't really understand why. I don't like. On one
We,
hand,
I
I
mean,
get it that people are just they're in a rush. They want to get
mhm.
these big changes happening. But on the other hand, why do you think that that phase is something that's so difficult for people to just come to accept or sit in?
I think it's definitely not shiny. It's definitely not flashy.
Mhm.
I think the word maintenance in of itself implies that we're not making progressions. But when
Mm,
we say like maintenance or building or cut or reverse, we're talking
yeah,
about your calories, right? Like we're talking about like energy balance.
right.
So just because your calories are staying roughly the same, because a lot of times in a maintenance phase, I'm slowly nudging them up,
Oh
very,
yeah,
very
for
slowly.
sure.
But anyway, like just because your calories are roughly the same, okay, so that's this little blip in your life is your calories, right? How many calories you're eating. And then we got all the other things that we can be focusing on, so the gym, your sleep, your digestion, your hormonal health. Like, are you having fun outside of the gym and training? Like, what
Oh,
else
that's so
can we be
important.
doing?
Yep.
Like, I mean, honestly, like for me, like too, like from 2020, like once I got past that initial, like, I've gained enough weight post show to be healthy. I would say I was more in like a gaintaining phase or like a health phase. It wasn't like I was like, 300 calorie surplus and, it was like just little nudges, along, and you just
Right.
find ways to continue to, progress. But I think for a lot of people too, they don't even know how they can progress. Like they don't know how they can be a little bit better in the gym, or they don't know that, their sleep quality doesn't have to suffer like it is, or their energy levels could be better, or they
Yeah.
just get so focused on just the gym and the training and the nutrition when it's like, okay, all the life things too, definitely play a role here.
There's so many. How am I trying to say this? I think there's so many people out there that think that how they feel right now is the best they're going to feel or it's normal. Like they get comfortable with how they feel.
Hmm.
But when they start focusing on things like you talk about your sleep, your energy levels, your just pure enjoyment of life and doing things, like you don't realize that you're probably not feeling as good as you could feel, right?
Hmm.
Because you're only focused on that scale number or those progress pictures that you're taking. You're not looking at the bigger picture. And I've actually over the last year or so, I'd say probably over the last year or so, I've seen a bigger influx with people whose goal is more longevity, health and
Same.
longevity than anything. And I love that because number one, you don't put a time frame on your goal, which means you're not rushed and you're not forced to do stupid things that are going to be harmful for you. And you're actually focusing on these things that you and I are talking about that are life quality improvements, right? You're sleep. I can tell you right now, I have sleep issues. I've always had sleep issues since the moment I went into the army. Um, I don't operate at as high of a level as I should because I can't, my sleep is horrible. I know that if I could somehow get better sleep, I would probably go to a whole nother level in my energy and my excitement and my productivity and everything like that. But I've learned how to navigate it how I am now. But you only know what you know, right? So if you're stuck in this perpetual gain and then lose and you're always going back and forth and you're not giving yourself time to just chill the fuck out and sit there, you don't have, your body doesn't have the opportunity to learn what feeling good actually feels like.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I think, yeah, I think too, like optimal, like is like a big thing now. Like people, like everyone wants to optimize everything.
Yeah.
And like, I'm with you, but like it can be dangerous. Right. And like, I think like
Right.
you're saying like, hey, my sleep, like, it's something I've worked on. It's something, is not fully in my control right now, whatever, the case might be. And just using that as an example. So like, do we get hell bent over like optimizing our sleep or like using it as an excuse? Or do we try to like work on other areas and like, what else can we, do? What else is in our control? Cause I think, if you always try to optimize and it's stressing you out, or you can't go to the gym unless you have your aura ring on to know what
Yeah.
whatever your body score or whatever the hell, like it's not optimizing you anymore, like put it away,
Well,
like
I did an IG live with Lane the other day, and we actually brought this topic up, and I asked him. I said, as much as you and I are science guys, we love data, we love this stuff. Do you feel like these Aura rings and these Fitbit watches and these like all this stuff? Do you feel like all this data that it's providing the average person on a daily basis is a net positive or net negative? And he's like, I think it's still a positive, but he brought up a really good point that so many people just live or die by that data, and
Mhm.
it makes them dictate how their day is going to go other than rather than just listening to what their body is actually telling them, right? Like they're going off in numbers instead of learning how to trust themselves. Like I'm sure you could probably attest to this too. Like sometimes I've felt the worst and I go in and I still go to the gym and I've had the best workouts.
Yeah.
And other times I feel like I'm raring to go and I get in there and like after 2 sets I've wanted to stop,
Yeah.
right? And so all this data can be very useful, but it doesn't replace you learning how to listen to your body and picking up on your hunger cues and your energy levels and learning how to optimize the old fashioned way, right? Just understanding your body. I mean, yeah, I wear a Garmin watch and I love it and it gives me my heart rate, it gives me all this good stuff. But I don't look at this thing and say, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna have a shitty day because XYZ
Yeah.
data, right?
Well,
And
and
I
I
think,
took mine off because I was the opposite. Like I was like the psycho that was like, "Oh, my score isn't low enough, so I didn't work hard enough today."
well,
Like,
that's the perfectionist
yeah,
mentality,
it's
and
messed up. So it's
it's
like,
even though we work on it and stuff, it's still going to be there. I mean, but that's also what's allowed you to be so successful too, right? Like I used to think that my perfectionism and my OCD was a hindrance, and it was because I took it to a negative extent. But when you learn how to utilize that for good, not for evil, it can be a driving force in your success. Like, I don't think I would be where I'm at today in my coaching career and my life if I didn't have some of those qualities. Right. And so
totally.
it's kind of learning about who you are and what characteristics you have and learning how to harness that for productivity, not for harm. And I think that
Yeah.
you've done that. I mean, you are, and I've seen it up close for a long time, you are a detail oriented, hardworking, perfectionist person. But now it's not to that extent where it's doing you harm. It's helping you propel to where you're at now and where you're going to go to. And I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited that 7 years later you're still a good friend of mine and we're sitting here doing a podcast and just seeing your growth. I couldn't be more proud of you and just happy for you. I wish we still lived close by each other. We don't anymore, but I can't wait to catch up with you soon in person and hang out. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. It's wild to think just both like, like getting in the lab, like so excited about, whatever's to come and, just, yeah, like we did something with it. And I think that's really cool, and showing other people
Yeah.
this cool exercise science thing and nutrition and yeah, and
And
using our stories.
if any of you guys are thinking about wanting to turn this into um, a degree, a college degree, exercise, nutrition, look at USF, University of South Florida. I still, I think it's a top 3 program in the nation. I think it's an amazing program. And Dr. Bill Campbell, Dr. Sam Buckner, Nick Martinez, like the whole gamut of professors there are just absolutely amazing. And so if you guys are thinking about it, look at USF. We highly recommend it. But I want to end this in a fun way. I want to, first of all, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so website is www.fortify-health.com. My Instagram is at Sarah Ford Bishop, and all my links are in that bio there. You can find the Fortify Health Instagram page there too.
And the podcast
is Unnamed and Untamed. It's on all the podcast platforms, I think.
Nice. Okay, so how I like to end these is I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. So if you need a minute to think about it, you can. What has been a quote that has either in the past or currently like that embodies your life, like that drives you?
Oh God. Not that. That's not it.
And that's the end of the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. No.
Like
I think
what's a quote that has like stuck in your head that has like pushed you and driven you to where you're at?
I have a lot, but I think one that always kind of resonates is it's more of like an acronym. So fear. It's
Mm,
either forget everything and run or face everything and rise.
I love it.
And that's definitely been true for me. It's always everything you want is on the other side of fear is I think another quote. So those are two biggies.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking some time. I think that a lot of people are going to get a huge amount of value out of this, and I'm going to link all your stuff below. Um, but it was great catching up, and I don't know when I'm going to be back down in Tampa, but when I do, I will give you a heads up, and I hope that I can meet up with you and Mike for some dinner and a couple drinks and stuff and see you guys. But I miss you, and keep kicking ass. You're doing an awesome job.
Thank you. Yes, we'll catch up soon.
See ya.